welcome to another Wargame Review from PlayersAid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at the new, publication.
It's a republication of three games in the Men of Iron series.
Yes. So it's got the original Men of Iron game, it's got the Infidel game, which is about Crusades, and then Blood and Roses, which is Wars of the Roses in England. So they put all those games together, stuck it in a massive 3-inch box, and GMT just put it out this year, 2020.
So you, in essence, you get three $60 to $70, probably $70 games.
Probably, yeah.
In one box.
Yes.
For $70.
This is by far and away one of the most value for money war games out there at the moment.
20 plus scenarios, 8 counter sheets.
Yes.
How many different maps? 10?
10. And each of these, Men of Iron, Infidel, Blood and Roses, each one of those has 7 or 8 scenarios in it. And each of those are a different flavor of medieval warfare. So you do get different flavors, different settings, and things like that. So there is a ton in this.
It's a very varied system.
Yes.
There's a lot here.
Whilst remaining mechanically similar.
Yeah, agreed.
Each of those titles does have nuances and different things to them, but the core of it, with different leader and battle activations and the way combat works and the types of combats you do, that remains the same. The differences are in unit composition, and like Blood and Roses, which is the latest title in the series. That one you can activate the whole army in one go if you get if you get your overall commander.
Yeah, we played Infidel tonight, and then you played Agincourt, which was...
Yes, I played Agincourt solo. That's from the Men of Iron title.
Okay.
It's a smaller scenario. It's pretty one-sided, especially if you play with the historical rules. You can strip those away to make it a bit more even, but it's a good place to learn the game if this is new, just the systems, so to speak. We'd also played Battle of Wakefield, which was in C3I, was that 29 or 30? It was 30, I think.
I can't remember the number.
It's a couple of years ago.
Got too much useless information
That
in my
was
head.
our first exposure to this series.
And I really loved that.
Yeah.
I had a great time with that one.
And that's from the Blood and Roses game.
Got it.
That's Wars of the Roses.
So that's making a connection for me. I didn't realize that.
Yes.
So in essence, we played Scenario from Infidel, one from Blood and Roses, and then you did a Men of Iron solo.
I've done those as well. And any of these scenarios, great for solo play. There's very little in the way of hidden information. You get these little seizure markers. That's really the only thing.
Yeah.
And there are people online talking about completely revamping it with the chip pull system, and I'm like, sure.
Yeah, I saw the one guy that said that
requires a little bit more effort and intelligence than I have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this system works fine solo as it is.
Well, the interesting thing also about this system, and maybe it doesn't play the same as in the solo, but you get to activate your unit, and I can maintain activation.
Yes.
As long as I can make, I assume that's called, I can't remember, cohesion roll or leadership roll? Continuation roll. If you can make that with, and it's usually 3 or 4 or 5 on a 10-sider, so it's not a given.
No.
But if you can keep going, and then you're going to add modifiers on this general track, so it's going to be harder and harder to do that. Ultimately, you will not be able to make that roll. Yeah. And then it would flip over to the other side, or, as you mentioned...
Yeah,
the seizure chits.
I got little seizure chits, and if you're, before you make your little continuation check, I can say,
I'm going to steal it.
I'm going to give myself a 60% chance I'm going to take a turn. And so you make a roll, and if I make it, then great, it flips over to my turn, and I activate the pre-specified formation that I was going to use. And if not, then it just flips back to you. I've wasted my chit back in the box.
Yeah.
You then roll your regular activation.
Yeah.
So
that is a very interesting, and to me it models well that command and control aspect of this style of fighting. There's not a lot of cohesion on this battlefield.
No, things get out of control very quickly.
Very quickly. And, I mean, you're mashing up 2 and 3 different formations in the same. It almost looks like the image I was getting as we were playing, and this was going through, was circling the wagons in the Old West as the Sioux were attacking. That's what it looked like. You had
in this particular
a group of retired guys, and you had your units that had fallen back, and it was like I was swarming around, and you were trying to get over there from the right
Yeah, I've
flank.
got a relieving force of cavalry.
But it just became a mashup of several times you'd look at it and go, oh, I can't activate that guy because his leader's out of command range. All he can do is really sit there and defend or continue attacking if he was attacking. I don't know. So that command and control with that activation, that is one aspect I really enjoy about this.
And so this series was designed by Richard Berg.
Yes.
And he also did Great Battles of History with Mark Herman. But there are some similarities to that system that, you know, when you look at the map, you immediately get some similarities, right? And you get these big battle lines, and they're divided into these, what are called battles, formations. And they each have leaders, and you issue commands to each of those. I think it's very easy to learn this system.
Yeah,
just as an off comment.
Well, it was funny. We played this a year ago. Battle of Wakefield, we played a year ago. It actually might have been 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago, at
Good
least.
gracious,
We
time
played
goes
it
so quickly at
at
John and
John's
Beatrice.
house, yeah.
But 2 years ago, and I still remembered when we got this out, some of those elements.
Yes.
I couldn't get it all fully right off the bat, but to me, that's kind of a shout out to the system that I think it's very engaging. I think it's very detailed. The list of modifiers for attacks are very significant, but they're not hard to follow.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of stuff, a lot of which is controllable.
Yeah.
But it's not overwhelming.
I don't believe this is overwhelming at all.
No. This is a game where I would say don't let it scare you off.
No. Try it.
Because there are some really fun things in this game. What I like about this, and it's GBOH has this as well, is when you get your units out of command, which will happen.
It's almost unavoidable.
Yeah. You can do your best, but there will be units that go out of command. They will either do nothing, like they won't go and engage units, or if they're engaged, they will just continue fighting, and they will fight to the death because no one's telling them to stop. And that stuff is really, really fun because you're like, oh, I'm going to go and make this attack. And then all of a sudden, this one unit, you know, does really well. And they get a continuing attack. And then they're like suddenly like charging forwards on their own.
They're in the middle of the enemy.
And they're like
literally
surrounded. And now they're out of command.
Yep.
And all they're going to do is just fight. And you're desperately trying to then like either push forwards to kind of get them back into command so you can maybe withdraw. Or it's just like, well, they've signed their own death warrant. Yeah. Like, let's just, the needs of the many. Yeah. Let's pull back. Yep. And those aspects are really important because in this style of medieval combat, controlling these big armies, very difficult to do.
Very difficult.
Incredibly unwieldy.
Yep.
Insanely difficult to disengage units because if you think about it, your average Joe at the front with a spear and a shield, or, a sword and a shield, most of these aren't professional soldiers.
No.
A lot of them are just levies or civilians or had some martial training.
Yeah.
And that's you're facing a huge battle line, pulling back and doing so successfully.
Very challenging.
Really challenging.
Well, the den of battle, the spit and the blood and the snot and the screaming. I mean, it's hard to understand anything.
Yes.
I'm assuming most of these soldiers were in kind of a constant state of fear as they were on the battlefield.
The adrenaline is going at like 1,000.
And there's not a lot of thought going on. It's more base survival instinct.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
You really get that in this mass of humanity that shows up on this battlefield. And I agree with you. I enjoy that part of the system. I think it's very novel and very cool. And we played earlier SPQR.
Yep.
About, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we played on Vassal, and man, that was also very similar.
Yeah, so you can see where some of those ideas
those
cross
ideas
over.
came, There are some nuanced differences, like didn't you mention the formations in this one versus the other one? It's just, it's a different concept.
Yeah, I don't know, because GBOH is quite old, it's been around for a while. These ones, at least in this issue, and I think it's the same with the other ones, it's built from the ground up to be really easy to use. So, like, this is my pink commander with my pink units. Here's my green commander with my green units. It's much easier to identify with something like SPQR, where, like,
you got to know unit types.
Yeah, here's my Triari, and that's just what they look like, and then
Yeah.
like I can assign any commander to it, so I have to,
But
write, I have to write down who's
you got to
commanding
remember
who.
that commander is the Triari or the Phalanx or the...
Yeah.
It's just interesting. This is
Everything
different. It's color-based.
The color coding is much clearer in this game.
Yeah.
It's there's less of it as well. I feel like the games have, 3 or 4 formations. Some of the GBOH gets insane.
Yeah, I think we had 4 different formations, right?
And this was a fairly large one as well.
Yeah, it was a bigger one.
And so, whilst there's a lot of counters on the board, everything's single stacked, basically.
Yeah, right.
And everything is very visually, easily organized. And the commands you issue are fairly simple, right?
Yeah.
Archers move and shoot at some point. Everyone else moves up and engages in melee.
Yeah.
Like, that's really it. And there's some, movement points within that, but you don't have all this extra breakdown of different commands that you can give, like you can in like the actual core GBOH. You could get into some real granularity with that. Yeah. This is actually really easy to learn and to play and execute and do it fairly decently.
Yeah, I think this is actually a simplified version of GBOH, I think.
Yeah,
and maybe some out there are saying, no, that's not it, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It still has a lot of that crunch. The unit matrix, what is that actually called? Weapons System Matrix for shock and charge. That's kind of a hallmark of all these ancient style games. We played with it or on it a couple of months ago. It had it in it.
It has a mini one of those,
GBOH SPQR has it in there.
Yes.
A knight is just simply better than every other unit on the field. So when they're attacking a pikeman, not a pikeman, but a man-at-arms, they're +3.
When he's attacking a pikeman, he's +2.
Yeah.
He's better trained, he's better armed.
He is, yeah.
Makes sense.
I love that part of any of these systems. It's very interesting to me. It's also a puzzle to try to figure out, I got to attack those pikemen with my cavalry from behind. And then, or I got to attack from behind and the front so that I get that from multiple angles, but benefit.
Yes.
And that's cool. I like that crunchiness. I enjoy that, trying to figure, because it feels like a tactical puzzle to me.
Yes.
It reminds me of, some games that we've played that you got to figure out how to defeat these guys. You can't just, it's like the combined arms type concept. So I really like that about this system.
Yeah.
This is a very good system.
Yes.
Really is.
The box has 3 war games worth of stuff in it. 3 big war games worth of stuff in it.
Yeah.
The actual rules to learn this game are about 23 pages.
Yeah. Well illustrated.
And
good notes.
And very clear. And it's like color coded for like, this is for only the infidel.
Yeah.
This is only for Blood and Roses. It's really easy to learn, but like you said, you can get into the nitty gritty and the stuff that's really cool with the weapons matrices, all the different die roll modifiers about positioning and status and things like that. And that's what I said earlier. Whilst there's a lot of chaos and things can go out of your control, you start off with a significant amount of control. Like,
at the start, yes.
I determine these are these types of units. Okay, I want to send them over there against those kind of units.
Yep.
I want to try and position them to have these good advantages. You're going to try and negate that, but
yep, exactly.
You're looking at that matrix. You're looking at how can I maximize my rolls and my modifiers, and make that happen and try to get some kind of cohesion. And then after a few activations, when things have gone awry, then it's like, okay, let's reassess my overall strategy because things have changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff I really, really like. Is like, well, my plan's all gone to crap.
Yeah.
So
what am I going to do now?
So what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I think from this kind of a grand tactical game where it's, you can see all this battlefield and that's what you want. It's like, how do I change my overall strategy now that my plan has just not survived contact with the enemy? That stuff's really neat in a game like this.
Well, and it keeps it fresh. You're not just gonna. I made the comment as we were playing. I want to play a scenario now that's just heavies on heavies.
Yes.
We might have some archers in there, and we might throw some knight. I'm looking for a scenario where we're gonna line up and we're gonna kick the crap out of each other.
Yes.
I want to do that. This had a lot of maneuver in it, and I enjoyed that concept as well. Trying to understand how my units could best your units, and vice versa, how I could keep your best units from getting into position to best me. I enjoy that. It's that maneuver concept.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
And this was very different from the Agincourt scenario, for example. Because that one, you basically have English longbows, and then they have a bunch of stakes that they've put out. And there's 2 big funnels, which you sit your really, really strong men-at-arms stacked with really strong leaders. And you just have the French running down the hill, but running. They're like rolling down the hill in their heavy armor and sloppy mud. And they just...
Like going through a machete.
I mean, it's awful.
A meat grinder,
Yeah, it's an absolute meat grinder, and it was such a different experience to this one, where it was 25 horse archers on the right flank, running around, encircling me, and just totally different styles.
Yeah.
And there's so many scenarios in the game that there's something for everyone, or you can play everything for someone, which is really cool.
Well, you kind of made the comment, this is a great value in a box.
Oh my gosh,
it's like buying, once again, 3 different war games with the same rules, but they're each different.
Yeah.
Man, we could play this for a year and probably not get through. I mean, we'd get through every scenario, but knowing us, we'd play them 2 or 3 times to figure it out.
And there's even there's even another title in this series.
Okay.
It's the
what is that one?
The
Arquebus. You said Arquebus.
Arquebus.
I think it's Arquebus.
Sure.
But
like that uses the same system. Like there's tons out there for
a newer one, I think, right?
I think that's the latest one. It came out a couple years ago.
Yeah. We haven't played that one.
No, but
and another comment we made before we go look at the board, you made a comment about this is what CNC Medieval should have been.
Thematically speaking, it's Men of Iron is really that, or even Infidel. That's what I was expecting and hoping CNC Medieval would be.
When it was more late Ancients, early Medieval.
Yes.
So it felt like Ancients.
It was like Byzantines and Assyrians.
Yeah.
Which I was hoping for Crusaders or,
And you get that here.
English and French. This has got all of that.
Yeah. And that's why you get that here. So
this is a bit more in depth than that game as well, but
I also really like a lot of the rules about the surrender and the your flight points, and it's a very neat once you get closer to your end game, you have to start making rolls and you get modified, and it's like you could lose at any time, which keeps it tense.
That's something that
you can't lose at any time. You can only lose when you get close enough within a D10.
But you can never predict. Once you start getting to that threshold, you can no longer guarantee yourself or bank on another activation. Right? Because at that point you start being like, now I got to make a D10 roll, add it to my flight points, and if you hit your loss,
over.
Then you're done.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of these games where they've got really high kind of point values, you're like, okay, it's kind of
we got to keep dredging it on. Yeah.
Here you kind of half get there when the game starts getting tense. You're like, oh no, it got really tense really quickly because not only do I have high points, I also have to start making the die roll. Yeah. And those die rolls are killer.
So that's another interesting thing, and I think that's intended to keep the battles more unlopsided. If you really break away and start smoking somebody, it's like
the game will be over.
It's going to be over quick.
Yeah.
So a lot to like here. I really like this.
Yes. What I will do, let's show you the board and just some of the mechanics, how it works, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. Okay, so this is a look at the map. It almost looks like a Great Battles of History Ancients map, but that's because we're playing. This is from the Infidel section of the game, where it was set in the Middle East during the Crusades, so there is a lot of open desert. However, a lot of the games are from Men of Iron, Blood of Roses are English or French territories where there's lots of greenery and hills and forests and things, so they don't all look like this, I swear. This is the end of one of our scenarios where we just had this swirling mess of battle over here, and we didn't do anything over here at all, basically. And you can see I've got my little line of Taranto and his knights just trying to charge in as a relieving force. But the game is played in activations. Someone will start the game, depending on what scenario it is, and you choose one of your formations. You can see they're color-coded, so this one's kind of a darker blue down here. He says, knocking them all over. This is my one. This is a pink one. Then this is green. You can see I got like a light green, and then this is kind of a gray around here, and I got a black one here as well. So for example, the Turkish player is going to choose, oh, they're going to choose their green one. You start with your little leader, and then he has a command value. This one is a 6. I'm going to show you here. So the leader has a bunch of values on it. The red one is his activation value. And then underneath that you have his command range. Underneath that, in the bottom right hand corner, is his movement value. In the bottom left there's a little white circle with a black 0 in it. That's his charisma value. If that was a positive number, that was their battle modifier, basically. So you look at who's within their command range, which was 6. So they're within 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're within 6 as well. And these guys over here, ooh, can't go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're looking at command range. Everyone's in command. If you're out of command range, you basically lose control of your units, and they will continue to do whatever it is that they're doing. If they're attacking, they'll continue attack. If they're not attacking, you can move them, but they will never start attacking. Basically, you check that, and then you move your guys. So all of these green ones are medium cavalries, and they would just move. So they're going to charge up using their movement factors and get into melee. Once they're into melee, they do all of their attacks, and then once you're done with your attacks and they've all resolved, then you just you check for whatever the next activation's going to be. And how that works is, I'm going to attempt to activate a different one of my formations, either this blue one or this grey one. I consult their commander's value, so this is a 4, and this is a 3, and you roll a d10. So let's say we're done with those guys. Well, I want to activate these guys. So you roll the dice. I roll a 7, which is way more than this value, so I don't get to activate. What it means is it flips to my opponent, and they get to have a free activation. That means they can choose whoever they want. So they might choose, oh, we'll activate these guys. They're going to move and attack, and then they're going to roll. Oh, I'm going to want to activate these pink guys. And they roll the 9. Oh, I can't do it. If you'd rolled a 0, 1, 2, or 3, then the pink guys can activate. And you can chain your activations, which is nice if you can do it. If you've got a lot of good leaders, it's much easier to do that than not. A lot of these leaders are 2s and 3s. It's pretty hard to do that. The other thing that you can do is, if it was the Crusaders' turn and I got finished with an activation, the Turkish player has a couple of these, what are called seizure markers. And so they might play one here and say, you have a seizure opportunity on a 0 through 6. Which is much better than like a 0 through 3 on this leader down here. So you roll the die, I've rolled an 8, this is a failure, this goes back in the box, you just wasted your seizure opportunity. But if you roll this, oh, I rolled a 6, great, then you seize the initiative, you seize the turn, and you can interrupt people. This is really important if you're in a pickle, and you really need to do something. You can say, oh, I desperately need to, I'm going to play one of these. You have a set number of these in a scenario, and they're randomly drawn. You have a pool of 8, you might draw 4 of them. So some of these have special effects on them, and don't allow you to seize the initiative, but some of them do. And so, you might force it to come over to you instead of them rolling their more and more activations and piling on the momentum whilst you just wither away, basically. So, combat. The seizure stuff is very, very cool. Combat isn't actually all that complicated. We'll take a few units and kind of show you. Facing is important in this game. You always face a hex spine, and you have, so for example, let's look at this guy right here. This guy has 2 frontal hexes, 2 flank hexes, and 2 rear hexes. Real simple. So you're always facing a spine, and you'll always have those things. Let's say we've got a little horse archer. The horse archer can shoot from range. When you're shooting from range, you look at your little fire tables over here. And he is an archer. So he's not at range 1, it's at range 2. So it's -1. So range 1, 2. So we're a -1. And then we're also a -1 for being mounted archers firing. It's harder to shoot accurately when you're on the back of a moving horse. So when archers activate, this guy's got 8 movement, you can move 8 spaces, and then you can shoot. What you cannot do is shoot and then move. Shooting is the last thing that archers do. They might only move 4 spaces and shoot, but that's fine. Or they might sit in place and shoot, in which case they don't move at all. So they might move, and then they've got to shoot. You literally roll a d10. We roll a 3, that's pretty pathetic. And we're -1 for being a horse archer, and we're -1 for being 2 range away. So this is actually a 1, and you just consult your little table here. The target is it on foot or is it mounted? Well, it's on foot. Is it normal or disordered? It is normal. If it was on its disordered side with the big yellow D on it, it would be disordered. So it's normal, we roll a 1, equal to or less than 4, no effect. If we'd have rolled something like a 9, and we're -2 is a 7, greater than or equal to 5, disordered. They would flip over. That's my fire combat. I've disordered them. That's great. That's fire combat. It's really simple. If you have archers firing on archers, the archers fire back, and it's simultaneous. So you would both roll a fire attack. Or the other thing that can happen is if you have cavalry and or any non-missile based unit, if they move in to try and do melee, then we effectively have an attack of opportunity. It's called reaction fire. You just get to fire on them before they actually resolve their shock combat or their melee combat. So that firing is actually a fairly simple thing in this game, the way that it works. Melee combat or shock combat, this is where things start to get really, really fun, I think anyway. Because positioning is very, very, very important. So let's say we've got this this little medium cavalry unit. He's going to charge in and attack this guy. Well, he's just going to do a regular attack. He's not going to charge. You consult the weapons matrix system. So we're medium cavalry. We're going up against a pikeman. So there's a 0. For example, if we were a knight going against something like light cavalry, we'd +3. Very, very good. If we were going against archers, +4. Because they're not as well armored, not in as good fighting shape. So we're a net 0 just naturally. Now, this guy has a -1 printed on him. That's his shock defense value. Just has an inherent defense value. So he's -1. So I'm going to roll the dice at -1. And there's a number of other modifiers based on strength advantage, or if you're disordered, or if you're attacking from the back or the side. So for example, if these guys were here, you have to attack every single enemy in front of you. So he would have to attack both of these, and because I'm splitting my strength basically, both of my attacks would be an additional -1. If, however, I was attacking from the side, and just attacking one guy, you kind of look on here and it says, all attacking units are attacking through the defender's flank. That is +2. If you're attacking from the rear of a unit, +3. If you're attacking from the side and the rear, then it's a total of +4. And that's important because you do all your moves, and then you do all of your shock combats, all your melees. So you can really get into some flanking positions, and then just devastate people on the flanks and keep crushing inwards. That's where this game shines when you're fighting battle lines. So to actually resolve this combat, we decided it was a -1. Just roll the die, -1. Roll a 4, -1 is a 3. And we look at the shock combat table. They are normal, and 4 -1 is a 3. 2 to a 3, attacker disordered. So we did a piss poor job, so the attacker's going to be disordered, right? That was like a terrible result. If we'd rolled something like a 9, then -1 is an 8. 8, defender disordered. So let's do that. The defender gets disordered, and they have to retreat a hex, and they have to go back, right? You have to in this game. You do not have a choice about it. You have to advance after melee combat. If they vacate the hex, you have to move in. when you start getting into cavalry charges, or if you're attacking disordered units, you can get into these continue attack results, which are really, really fun. Because you start to lose control of your unit. As they're charging headlong into enemy units, they successfully eliminate a guy, their literal momentum and adrenaline carries them forwards. Now you have to attack these guys, and it's possible to do that again. And if you roll really, really well, you might get another continue attack. It's just great fun when you start getting into these rolls and results, where you start really, penetrating these enemy lines and smashing their shield walls and things like that. But the game, everything's basically a two-step unit. You have a normal side, and then the disordered side has like a +1 to its melee defense. +1 is very bad for defense, because that adds to the attacker's roll. So these little pathetic archers go to like a +2, which means you can mop them up real easy. But if you compare that to something like these knights, that start with like a -1, they go to a 0. I had some really powerful ones. This guy's like a -2. It's really hard to defeat that guy in melee. He goes to a -1, so he's hanging around for a long time. But if you do kill them, they issue you a number of flight points. If you kill a knight in Infidel, it's worth 3 flight points. Once you reach your flight point limit, you lose the game. You actually check when you end a free activation. You look at your flight points, you roll a d10, and if the d10 tips you over, so if you rolled a 9, horrendous result. If you had, for example, 25 flight points, and your flight point limit was 30, and you rolled a 9, that tips you over, you lose the game. You haven't even got to 30 yet, technically from losses, but the die roll is there as a kind of a randomizer to keep you on your toes, and to keep the game tense, is what I'm going to say. But the combat, you get into these chains, because you rush up all your units, you line them all up, you do all these combats, some get disordered, some of them you punch through, and then all of a sudden, your nice straight battle lines start going all concave, or just splitting up entirely, units get out of command, then you lose control over them, so they just keep attacking. Or they don't do anything, so you have to go and try and rescue them with your leaders. You've got to move your leaders, get them into command range, so that then next time you can move them, order them to retreat and pull back. It's really great, and it's surprisingly not complex. Most of this play aid is terrain effects charts. The rest of it is some modifiers to these charging and shot combats. There's a few different counter-charging tables as well. And then it's this weapon matrix, which you just look at for a number, and the little fire charts. So just don't be intimidated by the game. It's very, very cool. You do get into these swirling masses, because everything's color-coded. It's actually fairly simple to look at and to evaluate where you're at. So that's just a kind of a brief look at the game. What we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the game, at least some of it. I remember when we got that issue of C3I a couple of years ago, Battle of Wakefield, and I was like, we'd never played a game like that. And so I was like, whatever.
Well, I think initially we were like, really? We don't want to play this. So I remember. Yeah. And I remember you were setting it up on a Saturday afternoon, and you tweeted it out.
And then you drove over.
I'm like,
I was going to solo it.
I was like, what are you doing?
I was going to solo it.
I know.
Because I wasn't mega interested and wasn't sure it would be something we would like. So I was like, I'll just push some counters around. If it's like it, we'll play it. But
so then I drove over because I was like, well, I want to play that.
And then we played it. And
had a good time.
And I remember I moved my units up, and then your cavalry ran down the hill and charged me. And they had a bunch of these continuing attacks.
I think I did 2 or 3 charges in a row.
And my lines just melted from the side, almost out of both of our controls. Because your units just keep attacking if they're doing well. And I was like, oh, wow. That was hilarious fun.
Yeah.
And so, this was just, when this shows up on the door, you're like,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and we have played a lot of different types of games. And I feel like in the last 6 months, we haven't played as many Hex Encounter war games.
Yeah.
Damn, this felt like a good war game. It felt like a good Hex Encounter war game.
Yes.
I'm glad we played this.
Well, and
I felt like it was we got back to what we know we like a lot.
but it's also single stacks.
It's not big in that respect.
Yeah, it's
or
not
complex in
unwieldy.
that respect.
There's a lot of units on the board,
Yeah.
but they're spread out, and
Yeah.
it's easy to see what they are, and it's easy to maneuver them.
Mm-hmm.
You have a couple of markers, but those are, on your retired units, which are on a blob bio standard. There's a lot of different shock and charge markers, which are mnemonics. If you're reasonable about it, you can minimize how often you use those.
Right.
But it's not, it's not like, oh, I've got like 25 hexes of 10 stacks of units each.
No.
I'm like, oh, I
This
hate that.
this was a simple hex encounter game.
Yeah.
In that respect, low counter density. The other thing, as we look here at the board, it's so fascinating. I had 3 formations, and you had 3 formations. It has boiled down to 2 formations of mine are attacking one of your formations. Right? Or is it 2?
So I had the
You had the black.
and there was a line of blue. Yeah.
Okay, so
I was just outnumbered.
It was actually 2-2, but it's fascinating that our very far right flank, we didn't really.
No,
We wanted to keep pressing the attack here because it
Yeah.
made sense.
but I like that
Yeah, I do too.
because there's options. If this
Yeah.
had gone one way or the
We
other,
might have opened this
if
up.
you'd have disengaged, if it had maybe been more even, this would
Yeah.
come into play a bit more. But if you can spearhead a good attack and start smashing someone's line, the momentum is with you.
Yeah,
you press that attack as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then you force the opponent to wheel away or to react and do something different, and then it's like, okay, where do I launch my second counter, attacks from, things like that. But that kind of strategy is what's really interesting to me about these games.
I would agree.
You get into the minutia of like, oh, I've got my knight against your man at arms. Okay, here's the little die roll. But the overall picture is something that's really cool to see play out and to try to manipulate that as much as you can to your advantage.
I'm sad that we haven't found this system. I mean, we found it 2 years ago, but
Yes.
this is really very good.
Yes.
It really is very good.
No, I agree. And
I like this better than I like GBOH.
interesting.
That may be a sin,
No,
but I like this better.
I've only played the simple GBOH, and I've played it a few
Yeah.
times. I want to play the big boys of that.
Yeah, and
just
maybe
to
and maybe
see.
that'll change our mind. But
But
at this point, I like this better than I do GBOH.
I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say.
Okay.
I like this very, very much.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how easy it was to relearn and to learn in the first place. It is not a complicated war game. And
No, not at all.
So
And that's good. I think
don't
it's a good
be
thing.
scared off by
No.
the size of the box and by
8 counter
the
sheets
the
and-
theme.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, medievals are getting boring.
Yeah.
Right.
This is fun.
It's really
It's
good,
fun, man.
And if you are like, oh, I like medievals, oh, don't know about this, like, give it a go.
Yeah.
If only for the value. There is so much in here.
Yeah.
And the game is easy to learn. I think I would say it's easy to learn.
I feel like it was. I mean, you basically
There's like introductory games, and then
Yeah.
this is like just a couple steps up from that.
like maybe a 4 or 5 out of a 10 complexity.
Yeah.
Something like that.
What are they
yeah, what do they rank it?
This is fairly arbitrary, but
Well, it's always.
they say it's a 4, and I would agree with that.
I would agree with
I don't know. The idea of this game might be daunting to people.
Yeah, but it's not
Do
in
not let it
practice.
daunt you. It is something
Yeah.
that a lot of people could pick up easily
Yeah.
and play around with, and there's just so much in it.
It's fun,
This
man.
is days and days of content in here.
We
You
could
line
just
it all
line
up.
these up scenario after scenario, and they take 2-3 hours to play, depending on how big they are.
Yeah, this was touted as a 2-hour scenario.
It
for
took us about
playtesters.
3.
Yeah, because we had
we
to
were-
read the rules,
yeah.
and then we had to have some dinner.
Yeah, we did. We broke for dinner in the middle. Anyway, I had a good time.
Yes.
I'd play this again in a heartbeat.
This is an excellent game
Mm-hmm.
and an excellent product as well.
Yeah.
The counters are the thick grey core. They look great. They got great artwork.
Well, and
considering
the art on the boxes are it's phenomenal.
yeah,
I mean, all 3 of those covers are great. The side stuff's great. That man at arms there with the shield and
This
axe,
little
that's
guy.
just awesome. That's what I wanted to play though. That's what I'm thinking. I was going to line those guys up and have those big halberds and just hack the crap out of each other.
well,
but
there's plenty of that in here.
Yeah.
We'll play more.
yeah, great game.
Yes,
Great
so
game. I enjoyed it a lot.
This is the Menavine Tri-Pack is what it's commonly referred to it. Check it out. Get it now. This is excellent value from GMT Games. I had a blast with it. I think I love this game.
I do. I think you like it probably more than I do, but I really like it.
Yeah, and
I like it though. I have fun with
one
it.
that I'm setting up, playing on my own, having a great time as well. So good for solitaire play, good for 2-player. I don't think it can support more than that. I don't think it does any of those multiplayer scenarios.
I wonder if you could just divide these sections up, and it wouldn't be any fun though. You'd be sitting there half the time.
Yeah, there'd be so much downtime. So excellent game from GMT. Check it out. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm Alexander from thePlayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.